This week on The Watchman, as the threats against Israel continue to grow, a global prayer movement has begun. Learn why millions of Christians around the world are joining together this month to pray for Israel for such a time as this.
We're calling people to pray 1 hour a day for 21 days for Israel. When we touch Israel, the church in America, Asia, and Africa, more's going to happen in the spirit. So now millions are going to know Isaiah 62 by the end of this month.
Plus, why election results in Turkey could have a serious impact on Israel and America. And where is the true location of the biblical Mount Sinai? A fascinating new film goes on the ground to find out. All that and much more, only right here on The Watchman. And welcome to The Watchman. Israel has come under fire once again this month, with the Gaza-based terror group Palestinian Islamic Jihad firing over 1,200 rockets at Israel over a 5-day span. Now, Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system intercepted many of these rockets, and many more fell inside of Gaza, never reaching Israel. Yet the latest flare-up was a harsh reminder that Israel is facing an Iranian-backed ring of fire on all sides. Israeli officials estimate that Iran provides Hezbollah in Lebanon with $700 million annually and provides hundreds of millions more to the likes of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, and various militias in Iraq and Syria, while also helping to prop up Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. All told, Iran is spending billions of dollars annually to fund terrorism across the Middle East, with Israel as the main target for all of these evil actors. At the same time, Israel is facing a diplomatic assault at the UN, which recently held an event branding Israel's founding in 1948 as a Nakba, or catastrophe. This is the same UN, by the way, that receives billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars every year. Now, that UN event featured an anti-Israel rant by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, who compared the Jewish state to Nazis and said that Israel has no claim to Jerusalem. Clearly, Israel could use a few good friends right now, and in the Isaiah 62 prayer movement, it's got more than a few. The organizers of this global prayer movement say that at least 5 million Christians around the world have joined together to pray and fast for Israel through May 28th. So how can you be a part of this mighty move of God? Take a look. And we are joined by our good friend Mike Bickle, founder of the International House of Prayer in Kansas City. Mike, you've got so much going on at IHOP, but man, you have a major movement right now that you're helping to spearhead for Israel. 21 days of prayer and fasting beginning May 7th, lasting through May 28th. Tell us why now for this movement of prayer and fasting for Israel.
So just in one sentence, what we're doing, we're calling people to pray 1 hour a day for 21 days for Israel. At least 1 hour a day, 1 hour a day for 21 days. And at first it was going to be just the IHOP family. We have a 24-hour house of prayer. As you know, we've had live worship for 24 years here. And so we were going to do it with our staff of 600. They raise their own support. So we've got a nice resource base here of people. You know, we're going to pray for Israel for 24 hours a day for 21 days. And we're pretty excited about that. And then some folks said, why don't you invite some of your friends? At the 3-week mark, we were like at the 1 million people wanted to do it. So we said, wait a second. This is not an IHOP thing anymore. No, we are just one unit. And now there's several thousand ministries that are in this collaboration. So we're one of several thousand. And so we created a new website called Isaiah62fast.com. And that website, it's not an IHOP website. So we don't use it for our ministry. It's a directory where just thousands of ministries, if they will commit to 1 hour a day If they'll lead even a little prayer meeting, they can put their information on that website. We've got 100 languages where the information is translated in 100 languages. And I've done about 50 of these kind of calls with Portuguese, Spanish, Russian, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Arabic, just a number of them with big national networks all around the world. I'm blown away. They're saying we want to bring our network of, 3,000 churches, one network, another network, hundreds of churches, 3 million people. We're all coming in.
I look at the external enemies that Israel is facing right now, the Iranian regime, its terror proxies surrounding Israel on all sides. And I think of the internal discord in Israel right now as well. Tell us why Isaiah 62 is so important to this movement. Again, it's Isaiah62fast.com.
Because Isaiah 62 is the most descriptive prophetic chapter in the Bible of the glory of God on the city of Jerusalem. It's 12 verses. It's line upon line, as you know, glory of God on Jerusalem. And so there's no chapter in the Bible that has that much prophetic description. Yet I believe 90%, maybe more, of the body of Christ is unaware of Isaiah 62. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying the Holy Spirit hasn't emphasized it in the global conversation. But by putting it in the title of this fast, again, we were just doing it for us, but it blew up. So now millions are going to know Isaiah 62 by the end of this month. I don't mean they'll be experts on it, but they'll be familiar with it. And new songs will come out of it, new podcasts, new messages, new conversations, all kinds of things about Isaiah 62.
It's a 21-day movement. Again, it wraps up on May 28th. I don't think that's a coincidence. That's also Pentecost this year on May 28th. As you look ahead, you're in the midst of this. What are you hoping for? What are some of your goals in terms of what God is going to do here?
Again, I'm saying 5 million, it's more, but millions of Gentiles are doing this? That alarms me. It encourages me, but alarms me too. I'm going, why in history has this never happened before? Because it wasn't this kind of moment that May's going to be. I think with trouble and with glory. I think both and, not either or, but I don't know for sure. But the fact that this wind of the Spirit got so many engaged, I said, something's up. It's serious. But the big storyline is that these let's just say 5 million, then they each have a friend or two. So let's say there's 10 million who know about it, who talk about it. Well, they all got about 5 or 10 friends too. So in the next year or two, there's going to be 30 or 40 million Gentile believers in the conversation of the biblical narrative of Israel. Then the Lord will do all kinds of things with that many people who love Jesus. They love the Great Commission. They just don't get Israel yet, but they're going to discover it. So I see May as a catalytic moment of an escalation of the global conversation of the body of Christ.
And Mike, this is also happening in the midst of Israel's 75th anniversary, the miraculous refounding of the nation of Israel in 1948. We're hearing a lot of talk, encouraging talk about potential revival here in the United States, but it seems that we can't really have a revival if, as you mentioned, if the church doesn't have a heart for Israel and doesn't grasp the centrality of Israel in God's prophetic plan.
When we touch Israel, the church in America, I'm talking about here, the church in Asia and Africa, more's going to happen in the Spirit. And then the last thing I'll say is Daniel chapter 10. I'm just awestruck by this because none of this was planned this way. Daniel the prophet fasted 21 days, cried out, and the demonic principality of Persia, of Iran, is what he was resisting. And today, 2,500 years after Daniel 10 was written, Persia, Iran has emerged on the world stage just in the last few decades. And it's Iran again, and it's 21 days, and it's Daniel. It's like, this is intense. I go, Lord, I never even thought about that. We just stumbled into this global Daniel 10 moment and this global Esther moment that we're experiencing in salvation history.
Thanks again to Mike Bickle for helping to drive this incredible global prayer movement for Israel. Well, up next, why you should pay very close attention to this Sunday's presidential runoff election in Turkey. That's coming up. Also, be sure to check out our new line of Watchman merch to show your support for the show. Just visit shop.tbn.org/Watchman. It's your one-stop shop for Watchman t-shirts, hats, mugs, stickers, and more. And welcome back. We've said many times here on the show that under the radical rule of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey, which is a NATO member nation, is more like NINO, NATO in name only. Erdogan was unable to pass the 50% threshold needed to remain as Turkey's president in this month's election, but he is favored to win a runoff election being held this Sunday and therefore maintain his grip on power. Folks, in my view, that's alarming for Israel and the West, as Erdogan continues to draw closer to the likes of Iran and Russia and tries to recreate the glory days of the Turkish-led Ottoman Empire. He took a step in that direction when he ordered that the Hagia Sophia be converted into a mosque. Once an ancient Christian cathedral, the Hagia Sophia was turned into a mosque the first time after the Ottomans conquered Constantinople. It became a museum in 1935 and remained one until Erdogan demanded that it be turned back into a mosque in recent years. We spoke to Dr. Hai Cohen of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security to learn why this move by Erdogan was so alarming. We've seen in recent years Erdogan announce that the Hagia Sophia is once again a mosque. Constantly he's talked about Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and how he covets it. What is the situation right now for Christians and all religious minorities inside Turkey?
Erdogan, we all know that he adopted a neo-Ottomanist also not only foreign policy but also domestic policy, and he was very much influenced by a Turkish thinker called Necip Fazıl Kısakürek, who wrote the need to turn Hagia Sophia back to its role as a mosque. So it's not a surprise for us that he took such an action, because at the end he also seized the opportunity. Which opportunity? The rift between the Russian church and the Ukrainian church. I would like to remind you, before the eruption of the war in Ukraine, the ecumenical patriarchate in Istanbul provided independence to Ukrainian church from the Russian church. And that is why when Erdogan turned Hagia Sophia into a mosque, he knew that Russians would not act in order to punish the Church of Istanbul. So he calculated everything from A to Z, in my opinion. He understood and predicted that the Russians will not act against the decisions. The Greeks, they cannot impose any real threat against such a move. And as a result, he only calculated that such a move would improve his public popularity at home, and he took the decision, and he became the one. He led the first prayer in Hagia Sophia and turned it into a mosque, and used curtains in order to hide the mosaics, the icons of Jesus and Mary. There is also another church called Hora, which is known in the Turkish language Kariye. Again, wonderful mosaics from Byzantine era. They all again were hid with curtains once again and turned into a church. Why? Because in the Ottoman times it was used as a mosque once again. So we are witnessing a neo-Ottomanist move.
Folks, Erdogan is a dangerous player in the Middle East, and he looks set to solidify his grip on power this weekend in a nation that boasts the second largest military in NATO, behind the United States. Well, up next, where is the true location of the biblical Mount Sinai? A fascinating new film goes on the ground to find out. That's after the break. And welcome back. Where is the true location of the biblical Mount Sinai, the very place where Moses received the 10 Commandments from God as described in the book of Exodus? A fascinating new film called Patterns of Evidence: Journey to Mount Sinai Part 2 goes on the ground in the Middle East to find out. I spoke to the man behind the film, but first, here's a sneak peek, and you can find out more at patternsofevidence.com.
I'm investigative filmmaker Tim Mahoney, and my investigation continues for the true location of Mount Sinai. Follow me and Exodus Explorers on a search for more biblical evidence.
These are the 12 stones?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4.
At this place, something very important happened.
There was so much evidence. It felt like I walked into something that was 3,500 years old, undisturbed.
The characteristics of Mount Sinai described in the Bible match the characteristics of a volcano exactly.
How could Moses have ascended a mountain into an active volcanic eruption?
When Moses fled, he went to Midian. Why haven't scholars looked in Midian in Saudi Arabia?
Because they can't. That's why.
What risk would these Exodus explorers be willing to take to prove the Bible?
After 5 years, he made a desperate decision.
Yes. He made a desperate decision.
That just kind of poisoned the well for everyone else doing to do scientific work in the area. And they put fences up and keep people away.
The true location of Mount Sinai is a topic, Tim, that has fascinated Watchman viewers for years. We've covered this issue. Why is this film different than other takes on this issue? What sets it apart?
For 20 years, I've been at the trying to get this film and this investigation conducted. And this one, I actually decided to look at 6 different mountains. So the first film in October that came out earlier, I looked at the first 3. But each of these films are different. They're separate from each other. So you don't have to see one to appreciate the other. This one is going to be looking at the mountains in Saudi Arabia, which had been the forbidden location for a long time for a lot of people, and that's why it was very difficult. And when I went to Saudi Arabia in 2002, I went there with official permission with a small group. But once I got to that mountain, things changed, and that's when we got into trouble with being there. And at the end of the trip, my footage was confiscated, and I wasn't sure where I was going to be after that.
Now, you mentioned you've been at this for 20 years when it comes to Mount Sinai. You've done previous films about the Red Sea, but when it comes to Mount Sinai, what sparked your interest in this particular hunt?
2000, 2001, 2003, 2000, in that time period, there was information coming out. People didn't know where it was coming from. And it was basically showing that there was a pattern of evidence for altars, for pillars, for potential graveyard that was matching the events of the Exodus in Saudi Arabia, but that it was forbidden. And I don't know, when things are forbidden, it feels like they're hiding something, right? And so I ended up getting to know the people, some of the players who I call Exodus explorers, and I started to find them. They started to find me, and we were doing interviews, and that was what was intriguing to me. But I also had another group of people who were very much against this idea that Mount Sinai would be in Arabia, would be in Saudi Arabia. They really favored other locations. And some of them were strong believers, and they had a faith. And so I thought, how in the world am I going to reconcile an investigation? And that's when I thought, why don't I just look at 6 of these mountains? And then, obviously, there's different ways to interpret it, but pretty much you can go through and look at these mountains and say, does it fit? Where is the location of Mount Sinai? Does it fit Midian, for example, the ancient land of Midian? Or what about the journey? It says it took a period of time, like 45 to, some people think 45 to 50 days to get there. Some of these mountains are so close to Egypt that you could get there in a short time. So that doesn't quite fit the criteria.
You've devoted so much of your life and your work to this, to bringing archaeology to life for everyone. What are your thoughts on why this is so important for Christians?
Jesus says, because you didn't, follow or believe in, Moses or follow what he was saying, how can you believe in me? And so when people dismiss Moses and the Exodus, which a lot of scholars have been doing, they don't think there's any truth to it. I interviewed 3 scholars who really didn't believe in any of this because they didn't think there was any evidence for it. And what we've always talked about is, are you looking in the right time and are you looking in the right place? But when they dismiss the events of the Old Testament, then they dismiss Jesus and the event because they think he didn't know what he was talking about. Not only that, you send your kid off to college now, and if he thinks they're going to take a Bible class, they're going to hear that these events didn't happen because there's no evidence for it. And I had a crisis of faith, Eric. I mean, when I was doing this, I literally came home and had a crisis of faith in the very beginning. But I was able to work past that, and that's when we started to find patterns of evidence. And those patterns are so powerful, and they're really showing that that God has acted in history. And that's why I think it's important for your kids, your teenagers, your family to know about this so that they won't be deceived in some ways from, when people say, oh, there's no evidence for that. Why would you believe that? That's why I think these films are important.
Folks, again, visit patternsofevidence.com for more information on Journey to Mount Sinai Part 2 and all of Timothy Mahoney's fascinating films on biblical history and archaeology. Great stuff. Well, up next, my final thoughts on why Christians must be proactive for the kingdom now more than ever. Stick around. And welcome back. When I think of the purpose of this show, I'm reminded of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 5 through 8. It says that as Christians, we are children of the light. We do not belong to the darkness. Therefore, let us not be asleep like others, but be awake and sober. Basically, to be watchmen and women on the wall. Folks, if followers of Jesus aren't awake to what's happening in these prophetic Bible times, then we will miss a golden opportunity to be ambassadors for Christ and to help lead others to the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus. So let's be proactive for the kingdom now more than ever. Hey, before we go, a quick reminder to subscribe to our YouTube channel at WatchmanTV.com for exclusive content and daily commentaries that you will not see anywhere else. Thanks so much for joining us here this week on The Watchman. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.